Hello, my name is Conza, reporting to you from my conventional but cheap basement set. Here to give you a handy nutshell on what the Watergate scandal was, how it affected our nation, along with how it affected Richard Nixon's presidency. Hopefully this video is going to be a lot better than last year, because in my opinion, the Louisiana Purchase report was a huge fail. Well, it was just a hot mess. So, please excuse me. Now, before we start, out of all the topics that I could have chosen, why did I choose the Watergate scandal? What's so important about that one? Well, there's one reason. I chose this topic because of its evident relations to current events arising in Donald Trump's presidency. You see, Richard Nixon, Donald Trump, and Watergate, they're all kind of related into this clump of information, so I'm going to try to throw that clump of information towards the audience so that they can understand what the Watergate scandal was. So please enjoy my report.
It's the year 1972. Don McLean's American Pie has reached the top of the music charts, candy bars are only 25 cents, and the first scientific calculator was invented. On the morning of June 17, 1972, 5 individuals were arrested at the Democratic Party campaign headquarters at the Watergate Hotel apartment office complex located in the country's capital, Washington, D.C., after a suspected break-in was committed.
2 years later, the FBI, after conducting an extensive investigation, had been able to piece together, finally, that this crime had actually been administered by the official order of the National Committee to Re-elect the President, which out of all the presidents that our country had to face in a prior time, unfortunately had to be the untrustworthy Richard Milhouse Nixon.
When it was proven in 1974 that Nixon was involved in the cover-up affair, if not the actual break-in, he became the first American president to resign from office.
Being a normal person at the time, all of this information would probably be too hard to simply contemplate, but people were curious. That's why many citizens of the country asked, what was the Watergate scandal? How did this affect the presidency of Richard Nixon? Or, why was the crime committed? Let's dive into the first question. What was the Watergate scandal?
Richard, having experience, found the pleasure in wiretapping information, which he had did prior to the scandal. President Nixon now aimed to wiretap the telephones at the hotel complex, in which he and his committee hoped to find information in the building's psychiatric office. The names of both men who led the operation were E. Howard Hunt Jr. and G. Gordon Liddy. Their team broke in and were later arrested after a short period of time when they were caught hiding under a desk. This break-in led by Richard Nixon was not the first time he or his administration had resorted to criminal acts. Besides the FBI, 2 reporters from the Washington Post were assigned to cover the Watergate scandal, in which their names were Bob Woodward, an American investigative journalist, and American investigative journalist and author Carl Bernstein.
These 2 men collaborated with 6 other reporters to help collect information on the crime, and to hopefully get a better understanding on what went down that early summer morning. Their team got straight to work, publishing their first insight on June 18th, which would soon be the sturdy foundation of a carried-out series of reports and conductions done over the next couple of years. Both Bob and Carl were known and commemorated for breaking into the truth behind the malicious secrets of the Watergate scandal, and were both commemorated for their deeds to the country with the George Polk Memorial Award and the Pulitzer Prize.
You're probably wondering, where did Woodward and Bernstein retrieve their information from while they carried out their research? That's where the mysterious Deep Throat comes in, an anonymous man who leaked information to both reporters inside a downtown parking garage, giving key evidence and guiding them through their work. This sounds like something that could come out of a cheesy spy movie, but it was completely real and took very serious at the time.
The famously unknown Deep Throat had been able to keep his identity secret for a solid 30 years with the help and trust of Woodward and Bernstein, although on May 31st, 2005, his name was given out by his family as former FBI Deputy Director, Special Agent William Mark Felt. He had actually retired in 1973, 1 year after the Watergate crimes were committed, and had from there out devoted all of his information to both reporters during the Watergate investigation. He actually died 12 years ago of a serious stroke at the age of 91, unfortunately.
When the U.S. House of Representatives listened to the Watergate tapes, including other recordings, Richard still attempted to cover up the dirty work he and his committee had created. This was done by heavily editing the recordings before they were released, one of the tapes having close to an 8-minute gap.
While President Nixon was digging his own hole into failure, he soon found that his American support levels were slowly eroding away. Well, you see, in 1972, he had won his re-election against Democratic Party campaign leader Gallup poll by a landslide of 68% approval. But the existence of the Watergate scandal committed just less than a year ago, along with Nixon's personal attempts to cover up the affair that he was involved in such an ill-like crime, suddenly created this unescapable hole of shame and lies. As time passed, by April, 83% of the country had heard about or read about the Watergate scandal, and soon his approval ratings fell to a staggering 48%.
Finally, White House official John Dean, who risked in spite of losing his government position, spilled evidence and documentation to the press proving of Nixon's involvement in the Watergate scandal. He was later fired by President Nixon himself. Sounds a lot like FBI Director James Comey and Donald Trump, doesn't it? Well, at the time, several other White House officials resigned from their government positions. In spite of drawing closer and closer to resignation, Nixon tried his very best to maintain his innocence, even after all of the reporting and revealing of recorded conversations and other valid evidence which was lowering his approval rates after his second term.
By late July 1974, the House of Representatives voted to impeach Nixon. The transcript of the June 23, 1972 conversation was officially released on August 5, 1974. 4 days later, Nixon resigned, of course. All 5 men who broke into the Watergate Hotel apartment office complex were charged with burglary, conspiracy, and wiretapping, which all 5 men were sentenced to prison. While these 5 men were arrested, many other government officials and representatives during Nixon's time either resigned or were fired by President Nixon himself.
The Watergate scandal had been one of the most recognizable periods of Nixon's presidency, and a time of distress and corruptness in the history of our country's government. From the break-in at the Democratic Watergate headquarters to the resignation of President Richard Milhouse Nixon, our nation was able to understand and see how corrupt our government actually was, and still is today with the current world events proceeding through Donald Trump's presidency. Thank you.
This, more than anything, is what I hope will be my legacy to you, to our country, as I leave the presidency. To have served in this office is to have felt a very personal sense of kinship with each and every American. In leaving it, I do so with this prayer. May God's grace be with you in all the days ahead.